Welcome to the Decision Lab podcast, the sanctuary for wellness professionals like therapists, coaches, creators, and more who are looking to over-deliver to their clients.
We uncover the truth behind cutting-edge wellness products by going straight to the founder.
We use our backgrounds in neuroscience, chemical engineering, and marketing to ask the hard questions in order to eliminate bias, misinformation, and fancy marketing language.
Allowing you to make better wellness decisions and recommendations for yourself and your clients.
So if you're a leader in the health and wellness space, welcome. This podcast was designed for you.
Join us every week for interviews that will change how you think about wellness. Hello, everyone. Welcome back to the Decision Lab podcast. And today we're interviewing Amy Cohn. So Amy is the CEO and founder of Joy Days. They are on a mission to provide low glycemic, better for you snacks that don't compromise on flavor. And you guys, they look so good. Amy is a former media and tech executive. She has worked for Disney, ABCFamily.com, and was the head of product and digital partnerships for the Oprah Winfrey Network. After founding a successful consulting company, Amy's 2020 colon cancer diagnosis inspired her to launch Joy Days, a next-generation food company offering low glycemic snacks designed to help manage diabetes and improve metabolic health. Welcome to the Decision Lab podcast, Amy. We're so grateful and excited to have you today.
Thank you so much, guys. I'm thrilled to be here. I love your mission as well and what you're doing. So it's nice to be able to talk to other people around it.
Thank you. I'm pumped to dive in. So one of my favorite questions to ask is, if I knew you in middle school, would I have known you'd be here?
No.
Oof. All right, you got to fill in the
Would
gaps.
I have
Tell
been
me
here?
why.
Wait, if you'd known me in middle school, I'd have meant no. I think you in middle school looked like I was probably on a science path. Super nerdy, like thick glasses, like chemistry. Like, no, not at all. You know, food business? No.
Hey, chemistry, Chloe's chemical engineer. I mean,
Huge chemistry nerd.
Food industry or whatever, like it could be, you never know. What happened? Like fill in the gap, like what your story. So super sciencey in middle school. Then what?
Super sciencey, but then also artistic. And so I think coming at it, I have the left and right brain. So things that appeal to both. I do think food does appeal to those, particularly baked goods. It's a lot of science. But I think that, you know, the branding and all of that too does appeal to the art side. But my college degree was that dual thing as well. So it was like half English. You know, it was like my majors were English and pre-med. So two very different things, the art and science. So I guess you could say it wouldn't be an obvious thing that I would end up running a food company. I would say that.
Yeah, I would agree with that. It's interesting though, we talk to a lot of founders and they do blend the arts and sciences and technologies a lot. That combination seems to be a common thread. Why do you think that is?
I think a lot of better for you is you do need a mindset that has more around innovation. And I think that it appeals to people who are more polymaths. So people who have a large variety of interests. I think anything in any innovation area, usually you'll find entrepreneurs that is the most appealing, where you have innate curiosity. It's a lot of drive into discovering something new and to be able to push through change. And I think for food, particularly in Better For You, you start to see the problems and the gaps. But if you have somebody who's not interested in many other aspects, you're not necessarily going to go tackle those things or come up with new solutions around them, you know? So I think if you found a nice common denominator, probably with entrepreneurs, it probably is curiosity. And so you do tend to find the polymaths around it. And so this endeavor ended up actually being a lot of, you know, interesting science, you know, really discovering too where there's a huge gap in the market, consumer need, but really doing a lot of research versus just like, you know, I'm in my kitchen and came up with something new. But that's still in of itself too, its own innovation.
No kidding. That's cool though. I like that. Interesting thing about you as well is you've got, which again, another common thread in entrepreneurs, some adversity that springs up and pushes you to do great things, it seems. But for you, it was colon cancer. Could you talk to us a little bit about that? Like, what was that journey like? What was like to be diagnosed?
Yeah.
What was it?
Oh my gosh, I could talk a lot about this. First of all, let me just say there's an epidemic of people in their 30s and 40s getting colon cancer. And so if you have any symptoms that you wouldn't necessarily think, I really encourage to get it checked out. There's a lot of things of why they think there's an epidemic. There's a lot of research going into it. And it's not necessarily, I grew up on a farm. I was a vegetarian. It's not for lack of like necessarily like not eating well, but they're saying that like there's certain cohorts that you had really strong antibiotics at younger ages, and you may not have had probiotics or that kind of learning. And so one theory they have is that it's affect microbiomes by having these antibiotics at an early age. And it's really hurting microbiomes early because they're trying to understand why they're getting in so many people, more in particular in their 30s, that are getting colon cancer. And if you do any research on it, you will see that the numbers are rising like crazy. And yeah, and it's not something that I think people always thought that it was like the old 60-year-old man disease and somebody who ate a lot of hamburgers.
Yeah.
And it's actually not. I think a lot of it's systemic on that too. But what's happening is that they're dismissed earlier, as like hemorrhoids or something. Because usually some of the symptoms, I'm going on a train, by the way, to educate about this if you can't tell outside of what I'm working on. But I think it's really important.
This is super helpful.
But it bleeds into why, food system, microbiome, all of these things is so, so important to start to really understand, because we need to understand the systemic issues of where things are happening. And for it to be so specific around colon cancer being something that's an epidemic, there's something there that's really interesting. But what I was going to say is that oftentimes it's dismissed as hemorrhoids. Sometimes it's like blood in the stool is your only symptom. Usually that gets dismissed, and therefore people end up not getting it checked out, or doctors dismiss it, and then they end up with stage 4 cancer. So, and I always tell this story too. It's a lot of people you wouldn't expect, but when I went through it, was unexpected. I didn't have a history. I had a doctor that pushed me to get a colonoscopy because it was not something that you would ever think about doing. Usually that's, when you're much older. They have pushed screening at 45, but truthfully, people should get them at 35. And if you have a family history, get it at 30.
All right.
I know, it's crazy. It's the most preventative procedure you can do. A mammogram detects cancer after you already have it, and a colonoscopy will cut out polyps before they turn into tumors. So
wow,
there's the crazy thing there. It's like relegated to that. But so, yeah, I mean, the adversity story is like not expected at the beginning of the pandemic, really crazy. Have to remove half your colon. And at the epidemic, this is before we had like a vaccine, so you couldn't have any family. Interesting fact, I was actually in the hospital with Chadwick Boseman, who also died of colon cancer. And he and his wife helped me, which was amazing. So this is why...
God, that is crazy.
One
That's
of
Black Panther. Chloe, I don't know if you know that.
yeah,
Black Panther. Yeah, in his 30s. And colon cancer. So I think one of the best people to talk about it. This is why it's so important. But it does make you look at things very differently. And I think, I came from a very different background, but you start to see what's out there. You start to see in every aspect of what things that are accessible, and not just food, but like healthcare. Why there's certain things are affecting certain segments, why things are affecting people. I come from a small town in Texas that's a food desert. You start to see things in a very different lens, and you start to understand why it affects, people. Different chronic conditions affect people, lower socioeconomic conditions. Like, a lot of that is systemic of food deserts and accessibility into food. There's a lot
Could you talk about what a food desert is real quick? I grew up with a mom who's a philanthropist and runs many nonprofits in that space, so I know what it is. But could you explain to people, what is a food desert?
Food desert can even be, it's not exactly in a desert. So it's not like a ghost town is what we're talking about. It's a place that doesn't have access necessarily to healthier foods, in a nutshell. And that could be whole foods. That could simply be better for you foods. Food deserts also are in places like Southside Chicago, where the majority of your foods, you get them from, bodega around the corner. It's my hometown of San Angelo, Texas, which is like 100,000 people, but it's still, your mouth went agape.
You're from San Angelo?
Do you actually know
That's
that?
where my half of my whole family is from.
No, you've got to be kidding me. No one knows.
I swear to God.
Town. Are you kidding me?
My entire childhood, I've been there for every Thanksgiving. Like, I was just there for my aunt's funeral, sadly. But yeah, It's
How is
crazy.
that possible?
My
I've
dad grew up
never met
there.
anyone that knows.
Betty Ford, Deborah Huntsucker,
Yes.
Elizabeth Ford, like, yeah.
Yeah. All right. There you go. To ask them if they know Jim and Julie Raymond. There you go.
All right.
My
That's
parents.
crazy. I can't believe it. I wonder how if you and my dad like
They're
went
gonna
to
love us
school
shouting
together or
out your
something.
name. Wait, you and your dad? What?
I was just saying, I was like, I wonder if like you and my dad happened to go to high school or something together, maybe. I don't know.
I don't know. Who's your dad?
Davy Isabel.
No, I don't.
Yeah.
That's hilarious.
Aaron Isabel is his brother's name.
What, Isabel?
Aaron Isabel.
Okay. I'm writing this down. I don't know.
That's freaking insane, though. We've never had a guest from San Angelo. Like that's nuts. I know right where that is. I've been there
Why
so many
would
times.
you have a guest from San
Yeah,
Angelo?
it's fair. Both my aunts went to San Angelo State, like right in San Angelo. Like
God.
I know
Oh,
it's nuts.
okay. That's really, really funny. All right.
What a time.
I
What a
know.
small world. I love meeting people. It's so fun.
I know.
We were talking about food deserts before, and in
I'm
relation to
glad that
San
I
Angelo.
shouted out. I've never shouted out the name, but that's so funny. It ended up being worthwhile. But you can attest it's a food desert. Right? Like, and how it's like there's, it's where are the trucks coming in? There's distribution centers, but it's still, understanding the food industry and how distribution is and who owns it, how easy it is to get here. You start to see like other bigger things that are way outside of just, hey, we have access, but understanding why. So, yeah, so food deserts is basically, it's usually dominated by the larger conglomerates, which oftentimes most of those foods are very sugar laden. They're very, heavy in trans fat. They're just not great because you're trying to appeal to common denominator in taste, but then also you need to get lower cost ingredients for larger distribution. So, tackling something in the better for you food system is a whole other beast, and it's how do you get it out there?
You mentioned better for you a couple of times. Could you explain what that means to the average consumer?
Yeah, I think it's a catch-all term more for startups in food that are trying to create healthier foods. So usually that's the people label it as better for you. And what it is, it's usually a lot more of emerging brands that are doing a lot of innovation around the food that they create, and what they do. Essentially, it's just better for you. So it's not something that's, it's not an Oreo. It's somebody who's trying to take out all of those bad things for you. But it often has the label of better for you, and it tends to be more earlier stage food brands.
It's interesting. Did your bout with cancer connect with your wanting to attack the way better for you space with Joy Days?
Hell yeah. Yeah. I
Tell me
mean,
more.
yeah, it was like going in, you just start to see things in a very different light. And I think, it's once again, you're very hyper aware of what you have, but more importantly, you start to see people that have the same condition that you do, and you're trying to understand why. And then you really start looking at things in a very different way. And so for this in particular, our brand is about blood sugar balance. So that in a nutshell, I think for biohackers, that's around metabolic health. But the reality is metabolic health, low glycemic, blood sugar balance, it really is the way that people with diabetes should be eating or have to eat. People who have cancer, chronic conditions. What that is when you say blood sugar balance foods, it's really the combination of low sugar, high fiber, because that's what helps sustain your blood sugar. In our case, low glycemic ingredients, and everything that really helps maintain your energy level and, your overall health, because oftentimes too, a lot of blood sugar spikes can lead to, that's fatigue, that's just, causes a strain on your health, energy levels, etc. But I think they're most closely associated or thinking around people with diabetes. So diabetes and pre-diabetes outside of type 1 diabetes, which you're born with, but type 2 is actually almost 50% of the population have. Pre-diabetes is actually 30%. Pre-diabetes, I know. It's always shocking to people whenever they hear this too, but there's a rise of type 2 diabetes in the last 10 years in kids under 10, 95% increase. Kids under 16. But still, That's huge. Pre-diabetes actually is affecting more people than you know. And I've had more people come to me that are healthy looking and they're like, oh yeah, I'm pre-diabetic. And they're like 29. And it's crazy. Sometimes it affects, more certain demographics. It tends to affect you. I meet a lot of people with prediabetes that are in certain demographics and backgrounds, and it's more genetic than anything else too, but it's not like they have type 1 diabetes. But a lot of this is attributed to the amount of sugar we've had in our food, throughout. Like, I think in the rise of sugar, I don't know what, 70? Whenever they just started putting stuff in, but then the preservatives. So you start to have taste. So our tastes change too. So we do tend to like things were more sugar and salt because they started putting those in for additives and to help things, as they were trying to make more shelf-stable products and outside of Whole Foods. And so that's really contributed to the rise of diabetes, like exponentially. And then also being sedentary.
Damn. Some of that also that we are now screening for prediabetes more now? So like some of the increase is also that like there's more screening that's being done as well.
There's more screenings. I think one of the things that when I first created this is that I was placing a bet on also not just affecting this like from a mission-driven thing too, but understanding that the rise of understanding metabolic health was going to grow because of the growth of CGM monitors and wearables. You have things like Oura Ring is now integrating into monitoring glucose, and they purchased a company around that. So I think people, it's been kind of relegated to more biohackers and early tech adopters too, who are wearing CGM monitors and understanding like their levels. There's a company called Levels that does that. That's been around for a long time. But I think once, you hit early adopters and then it starts to go mainstream in terms of people understanding it, people really start to understand how things affect their metabolic health and what those levers are. And this is outside of people with diabetes to really understand like how you should be eating and, outside of like fad diet or whatever. Like this is a pretty basic way of eating that's not trend-based.
It just blows my freaking mind that we're there, that we're at this place where a trend influences a buying decision as opposed to how it actually either solves a problem for you or helps you in some way. But it's just a trend. Like, oh, it's a trend, so I have the latest thing. It's like, what? Like,
I mean, everybody's trying to look to improve themselves too, but we do have fad diets and trends for a reason. It's kind of whatever comes about because people are looking for any kind of solve of like, how am I going to lose weight? How am I going to look better? How am I going to be younger? Blah, blah, blah. And that leads to a lot of like misinformation, and people aren't. Anytime you're trying to be healthy shouldn't be misinformation. I shouldn't say that. I don't want to lambast it. But I think there is a difference between fad diet versus basic ways that you just should be eating. Like everybody should be eating low sugar. Like I think that's a known quantity there. Like, we all know. That is not a fad. It's something for a lot of people for that to go away. We all know we should be eating more fiber. Like that is a known thing. And the majority, I think 98% of people do not get their required amount of fiber per day. You should be having at least between 25 and 30 grams of fiber per day. And the majority of people get below 10.
What about people that say, okay, Amy, apples have sugar in them. So do strawberries. Should I not eat those?
Right. I know. And then you're getting into a whole other thing too, but you're not getting into but that's not eliminating like sugars. And I think there's different ways, and people have many opinions on time of day or whatever. I think anything that's actually natural and from the earth is made to be here. Like, and everything shouldn't be eating in large quantities, no matter what it is, over-indexing in it too. But I think that there's some things too that we know, affect us poorly.
Right. Well, and a lot of actual fruits actually have fiber built into them. So you are absorbing the sugar differently. It's a different kind of sugar. Like there's so many different confounding factors that people don't realize. It's so different than mainlining a Coca-Cola right to the freaking vein with just pure 80 grams of sugar.
Different. And fructose is very different from sucrose. Like there's many different things, and you have sugar alcohols, which also it's like not good for you. But that's exactly right. I mean, whole apple has exactly what we're talking about, is enough fiber to balance the sugar and to balance that energy, you know, because oftentimes too, when you do mainline anything with any sort of like sugar or fructose, it's like your blood sugar goes up, which tends to get, you know, an energy level, but it's the fiber that helps sustain it and make you feel good and not have a crash, but then also help your body sustain whatever level it's at.
I'm really curious, what do you think the role of chronic stress is in diabetes and even cancer?
I'm no expert. I'm no medical expert. It's a great question. I think it affects everything. I think anything that's affecting your overall, like your cortisol levels or something, stress is something hands down. Like there's a ton of studies on how that affects you and your body and how it affects chronic conditions, you know, how it affects weight. I think I love the rise of understanding and making mental health a priority because that affects so many things, and getting a handle on that is key.
Yeah, no kidding. Stress is one of the quickest ways to increase the spike your blood glucose, actually. So it's interesting the effect it has. Some of the research I do. But tell us about how does this come into Joy Days then? Like we're talking about like low sugar, we're talking about fruits, we're talking about all this kind of stuff. You did something about it. Tell us about it.
Yeah. Yes. And so we, you know, kind of coming at it from this lens, we first polled people with diabetes and asked, what do you miss most? And the first answer was a cookie. We polled 3,000 people. And so that's how the cookie came to be our first product. And we set out to recreate, you know, if it's like, okay, if that's the thing that they miss, what's the one that the mainstream one that they miss like a lot? And it came up as Chips Ahoy. And so we're like, okay, how do we recreate Chips Ahoy so it's better for you? It doesn't spike your blood sugar. And so I brought in the former president of the American Diabetes Association, is my advisor, dietitians, and she's also an endocrinologist as well, an R&D team, a chef from Noma, actually. So he had worked at Noma before too to help do the benchtop. And then more importantly, an R&D team who had some of the best baking experience. So they created grandma's cookies. They've created all the cookies that you're like commercial that people love. And so our guardrails were, we need this to have this nutritionals, this amount of sugar, this amount of fiber. We need low glycemic ingredients, and we need it to taste like a Chips Ahoy. And so he told us actually it was the hardest thing he's ever worked on. So it took about a year and a half of full R&D. And we've still like had to work on it some even after it's out in market. But at the end of the day, we've created a chewy Chips Ahoy that per serving, which is 2 cookies, same size as Chips Ahoy, is only 3 grams of sugar total. And it's natural sugars, 5 grams of fiber, all low glycemic ingredients. And, you know, it scratches that nostalgic itch that you want, but it's a healthier thing to reach for. And also you can wear a CGM monitor and see that it doesn't spike your blood sugar. So it's actually, you know, there's a lot of terms around functional foods, but this is actually food with actual function and function that you can measure. So that was, you know, whenever you take out, going back into the sugar discussion, sugar out of a baked good, this is why it's so difficult to do, because sugar enables browning, it enables binding, enables preservatives, everything that makes a baked good what it usually is. You know, gluten-free is also challenging too, but oftentimes too with gluten-free, you still have to put in sugar because you need that to make it a baked good. So we kind of, you know, that's a specific choice too. And then for us is we went the low glycemic route, and you kind of have to choose one path or the other because dealing with all of it is really difficult to do from an R&D perspective.
So if I may ask an extraordinarily direct question, there are Quest cookies. Why go about this mission? Starting companies know it walk in the park. Why go about this mission if there's already things out there? Like what makes Joy Days different, or what made you so passionate that you had to do it?
Yeah. Well, Quest cookies are a protein cookie. So it's not necessarily a low glycemic option to balance your blood sugar. It's just a protein cookie. And there is sugar, you know, Lenny and Larry's protein cookie, ton of sugar, you know, and so people tend to think better for you is just having one ingredient or some sort of marketing around it. And therefore all of it's looped in together, if that makes sense. You know?
Yeah, that's right. That's true.
Reading the labels, and that goes just into how you market it or whatever. But because it just simply is better for you, people kind of lump it in as like, oh, that's just a healthy cookie. but without really looking at like what it actually has and really looking at the ingredient label, So there's like 25 grams of sugar. You're like eating a Coke. It's the equivalent of a Coke, maybe half of a Coke. But you have protein, but there's, no fiber. There's a lot of different ways to kind of look at that. And all of those things are good. It just depends on what you're kind of going after.
Talk to us about the marketing and the branding. It's beautiful. What all inspired that?
Well, the name is Joy Days. So one of the things about having something that is familiar and something that you enjoy and feels indulgent brings joy. And so we leaned into the name in terms of color. So one of the big things there was like, we really want a color palette that brings joy, and it also sticks out on shelf. And so the color, the logo, everything about it was really, with that lens. And then more importantly, we knew we were tackling a category where low glycemic products, you tend to be glucerna, which is very medicinal and dated. And anything kind of tackling this area all kind of have that look. Medicinal, dated, what I say is otherizing. Meaning I have a condition, therefore I need to have this on my desk. I have glucerna, I have glutino, and it kind of otherizes you. And we talked about, this is pretty basic in terms of how you need to eat anyway. So we don't have anything about diabetes on the front because we appeal widely to many different customers. And we didn't want to pigeonhole ourselves into that category. We'd have basically in terms of the messaging hierarchy on the front of package, we knew that having numbers, a lot of people do look at when you do have diabetes. So we knew that they were already looking at those. So we made those front and center on there and called out 3 grams of sugar per serving, 5 grams of fiber, protein. And we knew that that was enough of a nod. But then we also appeal very broadly to a lot of kids, which is great because there's a lot of like sugar laden, no fiber snacks for kids out there. And the bright, happy packaging was really great. And then a mom can look at it on the front and see that it's actually low sugar and fiber, and it's actually good for them. And so really that was kind of the idea behind the branding, and to make the messaging really fun. We're really trying to lean into things around what brings you joy per day, even outside of like just the food and of itself. And so we're actually starting a whole TikTok channel around content where we're just going into people on the street and being like, what brings you joy? And I love hearing people's answers because you get like, sometimes it's like somebody was like a red sauna, or it might have been like that they have this very specific cup of coffee in the morning or something like that. And it's just one of those little nods about having something that's so small per day that is kind of like similar to like a gratitude journal, but like something that's just always a reminder to you of like those little things that bring you joy. And so we're really trying to lean into that for our branding as well.
Oh yeah, I love that.
It's beautiful.
Something that I'm curious about, speaking of things that you put on front of a box, like low sugar, no sugar, X number of grams of sugar, blah, blah, blah. What is the difference between sugar, added sugar, and a sugar alcohol? Because those are the 3 big ones I see on these better for you type of things or whatever. Some of them have no added sugar, but they have sugar alcohols. Some of them have normal sugar, but no added sugars, and no sugar. Like, what the hell is going on?
I know. I find it actually really fascinating. I think that's a great question. And I love that you asked that, actually. I think, okay, well, I know. Okay, so sugar, let's break it down. So sugar alcohols are anything with an OL at the end. So maltitol, erythritol, anything that has that, which signifies it's an alcohol. Sugar alcohols were developed to have some sort of alternative sweeteners. And so they're more chemical based and, man-made, if you will. Sugar alcohols often tend to cause stomach distress. A lot of people don't feel good. A lot of people don't know it's actually the sugar alcohol that's doing it. But, a lot of things, whenever we kind of went into the real chemical route of alternative sweeteners, we kind of went down this path where none of it's that great for you too. But we had, what was the one too that was in like Diet Coke for so long? Anyway.
Aspartame?
Thank you. Yes. So once again, a man-made sugar. Added sugars are interesting, and I think that there's a lot of discussion around it where, does it really matter? Do people really care? Because oftentimes added sugars tend to be, Really, you just need to look at total sugar. Personally, like, it's just look at total sugar. Added sugars, there's no, it either comes from something, I'm not going to get this right. And I think the product regulator is going to kill me for answering this. Because there's a lot of, by the way, in the food system, there's all these regulatory things about what constitute as an added sugar. And there's a ton of variability around it. Sometimes dates go into added sugar. Sometimes they don't. There's no threshold. Usually there's a lot of regulation on how you can say things. Like I can say for fiber, if I have this amount of fiber, there's a good source of fiber, there's a great source of fiber, and there's this. And you have to meet these thresholds. So 5 grams of fiber, we meet the threshold of good source of fiber. And that's a regulated thing that's standardized by FDA, all of that. You have to meet certain things. However, sugar, there's no regulatory thing around what you can say on package that constitutes low sugar. So you could have 10 grams of sugar, you can have 1. Some people will literally on package say it's low sugar, but it's not regulated in terms of how you can say it. But there's other things that are regulated. So it's really crazy. It's such an interesting world, but that in of itself, and you have to make sure you're compliant within what you can say on package. But that was the real surprise for me, was understanding there's no threshold for what constitutes when you can say low sugar or not.
What the?
It's not the reason we don't say low sugar. Yeah, it doesn't mean anything.
That's insane.
But we have the numbers because it's factual.
What the hell? That is there is no regulation around what you can consider low sugar. That blows my mind. Like, I guess it shouldn't blow my mind in this day and age, but still, like,
yeah.
Maybe to help a consumer, when you were looking for snacks, when you were going through your cancer healing journey, what would you consider a high sugar treat or something? Like, what would your personal threshold be?
It's a high sugar treat?
Yeah.
Oh,
so if you're
shopping
in the grocery store, like, yeah, if you're looking for, say, your cookie or a drink, what was kind of your threshold for the max amount of sugar in maybe a snack or something?
Well, and this goes into what type of sugar does it have?
Yeah.
Like, a Coke is like crazy amount of cane sugar. That's going to make you feel like shit. If there's something that has 10 grams of sugar, but they have 5 grams of fiber or something in it too, usually that's something you kind of want to eat versus like something that has like 25 grams of sugar and there's no fiber and there's no protein. It's like looking at that in that kind of lens. What people don't understand too is that having protein alone is not a blood sugar balancing. You still need the fiber to help really like say that you are blood sugar balanced. Just being low sugar and low carb, that does not fit in that category. That's where keto is in a different little category. There's no fiber usually in keto. But then there's no regulation on what you can call keto or not either. So many people will claim keto, but there's no regulation on what's keto or what's not. There's some like loose guidelines, but it's made by people who are done. It's not done by the FDA.
It's freaking insane. Like, I digress. Speaking of claims.
I shouldn't be saying that now. I'm going to get in trouble, but I'm like, not the time that I looked at it.
Hey, it's all right. It's all right. There's something I'm curious about. Keto's a bad.
Yeah, let's circle back on that.
Let's do that. Controversy gets views, Amy. Let's go. No, I'm just kidding.
Yeah.
But something I'm curious about is whether or not the rest of the industry is a cluster. You know what? Your specific product, have you by chance done or had a chance yet? I know you're a startup to do any research on your cookies and your snacks on glycemic index or like glycemic spike or blood glucose levels and things like that in people or in humans yet?
Yes. So there's a separate thing in terms of clinical trials, which are really expensive and costly. And we've talked to a lot of universities that can help with that. However, we did send it into actually a university that specializes in testing for low glycemic products to make sure that it met the threshold. And they do also monitoring on different people in there too, but it's not enough people to quantify a clinical study. So when you do a clinical study, then you can actually make claims and say, this does not spike your blood sugar because it was tested on 10,000 people and this percentage number of it didn't affect. However, for ours, and also understanding, we're in a tricky space because that is a claim that's really hard to substantiate because blood sugar is so affected by so many things. Like we talked about stress,
Mhm.
sleep,
Yeah.
what you ate
Yeah.
earlier that day, what you didn't eat. It's wildly different. And even in people with diabetes and without diabetes. So getting in and promising that is, there's a reason we don't say it on our website. We say life's sweeter without the spikes. I can say anecdotally that a lot of people, and I've worn a monitor, but it's not necessarily something you want to go out and make a claim for because it is so variable per person. What we can do is actually test everything to make sure all of our ingredients fall under, and there is a low glycemic index system. So anything under 50, you can actually quantify as low glycemic ingredients. So that is, you can actually claim because there are.
And that's based on the ingredients.
Yes.
And so that's where the spikes thing comes from. Based on your ingredients, life's better without the spikes. The ingredients would spike you less than other ingredients.
Well, ingredients and then the combination of how you make those. So once again, this goes into the right ratio of protein, fiber, low sugar, mid carb. And carbs are so variable.
And what sweeteners are you using based on our little foray into the different types of sugars and stuff?
Yeah. So we use monk fruit, we use date paste, and allulose. So allulose is a new sweetener that mimics, doesn't have an aftertaste, and it's made from figs. And so it's fairly new, and you'll find more and more products actually having it. It has a weird name though. I don't know why they've named it that, but it actually, it's a really good sweetener. However, because we're going into Whole Foods has yet to accept things with allulose in them, so we reformulated without it and used a couple of new sweeteners that are new on the market that have like a little bit of monk fruit, green banana extract, and some other things in it that make it still sweet, but without like an aftertaste like you would with like a stevia or something like that too, which that tends to taste chemical for some people.
As you're innovating on the product and stuff, how do you like some of the stuff you sent a certain formulation off to like a college to kind of have some type of other third party look at it and stuff? As you're formulating and doing new tests and creating, or not new tests, but new product development, how do you balance that, like testing and seeing like what's actually working and not spiking or not spiking glucose and all that kind of stuff?
I think that the cookies were our most challenging thing at this point too, that we're, iterating off of those flavors. And anything it's easier to do it off of like the formula that we have existing and just change it up based on flavor. But we have a couple of other things in the works that are in an R&D capacity too. And so it is just, the parameters. We work with dietitians. And, because of that too, we kind of know what works and what would be recommended by, endocrinologists or doctors. We were one of the only brands accepted into Startup Health, which is a global fund of healthcare entrepreneurs. We are recommended by other medical professionals. We were in the Walmart diabetes aisle as well. And because of how we met the standards of their dietitians and doctors.
Damn. Do you know what any of those standards are?
Actually, no, but if they follow the same guidelines that we were given by the endocrinologists and dietitians that we worked with who have expertise in that, I imagine it's the same. So it's just that once again goes back to the ratio of fiber per amount of carb, this threshold of sugar, this threshold of trans fat, this threshold of protein.
Damn. And is that like proprietary, or is that something that you could say out loud to help people understand, like if they're looking at other products like tortilla chips or something, I don't know, like other products that they could look at? Because if they're getting cookies, they should get Joy Days, right? But other products, like what is that ratio? How could you educate the consumer?
Oh, you're putting me on the spot because the dietitian had to write it all out, and it's actually like how you calculate per. I can email it to you. I just have to look it up because I'm going to get it incorrect if I try to say it without looking at it.
No, I get it. Yeah, we can put it in the description for sure. I'm just curious. That'd be great for the average consumer to know so that they can just be educated for any product in this space.
Yeah, and I'll credit to the dietitian we worked with, this woman named Meg Moretta, who's like a certified diabetes dietitian, certified, she's a celebrity dietitian here in LA, but I think it's common knowledge with most people who are certified dietitians. So
Wow, that's awesome. Why should someone who's not diabetic still eat low glycemic foods?
I wouldn't necessarily say anyone should be eating low glycemic foods, but I think it's more about eating in a way that is blood sugar balanced, truthfully. And that's low glycemic can mean different things of falling under the glycemic index. And it really depends you can combine it with a high glycemic food, but it's really going to be going back to that formula we discussed about the right ratio of protein, fiber to carb. And then we don't have thresholds on sugar, but you want to keep it low. And I think it's, individual on those. But like someone with diabetes, they have to, when you're wearing a CGM monitor, they do have to bolus differently, which is basically bolusing is how much insulin that you're pumping into your system. And they are constantly doing this. They constantly have to look at the numbers. You constantly have to know how much your carb and sugar intake is to see how much insulin you. So this is something they do every single day.
Got it. Wow. Interesting. All right. Well, we're coming up here on our time. So something before we go into kind of our final 5 questions here, I would love to understand like what's your vision for Joy Days? Like what's your next 10 years? Are you working on new foods or is it going to be only cookies? I know you guys have bark. Do you like what's the future look like?
I think it's all around, I think blood sugar balance is really where our stake in the ground is, and indulgent food. I think recreating something that brings you joy, and that's indulgent. So I've never said we were, wanted to be a company, just about this company. Like I've never had ideas around running a cookie company, but I think in terms of a larger, mission, it's around creating a vertical for foods and a platform around that, and a vertical around this specific health and medical need.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Damn, I love that. If you ever recreate bunny tracks, let your boy know because I will definitely start ordering it.
Wait, what are bunny tracks?
Bunny tracks? You never had bunny tracks ice cream?
No, I have no idea.
God. They're blue. This is such a terrible thing to shout out on a podcast that's all about low sugar, but it's bunny tracks is a like blue bunny ice cream or whatever. It's like ice cream. There's like caramel. There's like chocolate chunks and things. And then there's like these little peanut butter cup thingy-majiggers, like freaking fire. Love it. Ate it my entire childhood. It's the best.
My God. Wow.
But
okay.
Absolutely like just mainlining. They're not even trying to hide the sugar. It's not sugar alcohol. It's just pure sugar. Nothing hidden. Just this is sugar. But it's my favorite. So if you ever make that one.
I mean, and cane sugar, honestly, is not that bad for you in smaller amounts, of course. Cane sugar is still like a cane plant. It's just moderation. We've just overloaded it into stuff.
Yeah. No kidding.
Bunny tracks. Okay.
All right, let's move into these beautiful final 5. Chloe, you want to hit the first one?
Yeah, absolutely. Amy, what's one question that you wish more people would ask you?
God.
I know we're gonna put you on the spot with these ones.
I know. I should have looked. What's one question I wish people would ask? Wait, let's move on to the next one. I think about that.
Okay, deal.
Second one's just as hard, but here we go. The second one is what's an important truth that most people disagree with you on?
Bean burritos are the best thing on earth.
Never have I heard that one ever in my life, but I'm here for it. Especially if it's down in Texas.
Yeah. I don't know. That's crazy.
All right. Bean burritos are better than any other type of burrito.
Yeah.
Burrito might spike the old glycemic index there, but...
Actually, no, I know. No, it's true, but they do have protein. Actually, it's putting rice in bean burritos is a good thing. That's horrible. Why? It's just filler.
So you're not a fan of that?
No, not at all.
I'm with you on that, actually. I'm with you on that. I don't...
Why do you put rice in a bean burrito? There's no need.
I feel you on that. I feel you on that.
No.
All right. Do you have...
Just like, I'm answering honestly. I don't know.
It sounds like the question you wished you were asked more is, do you want a bean burrito?
No. But yeah, sure. I don't know. Like, what's your like? I'm really good at like always knowing good restaurants, cookbooks, that whole thing. So there you go. Ask me where to
Love
go.
that.
Well, your favorite cookbook?
I would say I think Alison Roman is a good standard. It may be a pat answer. Her cookbooks are always so good, and anything by Melissa Clark because her recipes are really well tested. She's a writer for the New York Times. Like those two cookbook authors, you can't go wrong.
There you go. Wow. That's awesome. So something else that we like, or something we like to ask every guest is what's a partnership or connection that would really help you outside of just giving you money?
I think more groups that are working with kids with type 1 diabetes.
Got it. Got it. Okay. Groups working with kids with type 1 diabetes.
Mm-hmm.
Anybody knows anyone, hit up Amy.
And another tradition we have here on the podcast is we also always ask a previous guest to leave a question for the future guest. So your question comes from Filippo Negro. He's the CEO of Youth Health Tech. They're basically an app that provides you a full medical screening from your phone. They do facial scanners, voice scanners, and he really believes that aging is optional. So he is asking you, how long do you want to live for and why?
I think 95 is a good one. I don't know why I wouldn't say going into 100 because I think sometimes too, there's a certain capacity of when I would think your body just goes out. And I think that's why. I think past 90, it seems like your quality of life to me, could be wrong, hopefully this changes, would start to get really hard. You know, I think when you're less apt to be able to travel and do things in a physical way too, it seems that that's when your quality of life depreciates quite a bit. You know, when it goes outside of your hands a little bit, that's what I would say, versus just trying to live long to live long.
If your health span stayed consistent, how long would you want to live then? So like what you're describing, your quality of life, if you're able to move and think and act and do and be and like live, that's your health span. So if you had good long health span, and you weren't bedridden, right? Like, would that change your answer?
Yeah, as long as possible. If you have a good quality of life, then as long as possible. Why put a date on it? I'm just referencing where you have a tendency to see that there's like huge drop in decline. Maybe that's post 85, I don't know, but that's kind of what it seems. So, but if your quality of life and you're able to get out and enjoy people and be with people and do things and move, yeah, as long as possible.
I feel you on that for sure. All right, it's your turn. What question would you like us to ask the next guest? There'll be a health and wellness founder of some flavor, but you don't know who it is.
What do they think are one of the biggest epidemics of our time?
Ooh, that's a good one.
What is it for you?
I mean, clearly I'm tackling this area, with the rise of diabetes. I mean, there's so many things. If you say the biggest epidemics of our time, there's many different things too. But I think from a health and wellness perspective, I think a lot of things are attributed to that, and cancers. We could also say blood sugar affects microbiome, all of that. And so that goes into colon cancer. So it's really about how our food, what we're eating, is affecting the overall impact of chronic conditions.
Wow. Beautiful. I love to hear that. Awesome. Well, we appreciate you taking some time to hop on with us and have a conversation about Joy Days and so many interesting and disturbing things I was not prepared to hear today. So very much appreciate that. Is there anything you'd like to leave the audience with, or like a final message or a place that you'd like to direct their attention?
Yeah, come to our website, send us an email, go to getjoydays.com. Feel free to reach out and ask of anything too. If you have questions around colon cancer, if you have questions around diabetes, if you have questions around, our products, or if you just simply, more importantly, like, as we're trying to build up our brand around what brings you joy, I'd love just more people being able to submit to us things around that. So that would make me very happy.
All right, take a screenshot of this podcast, then post it to your story and at Amy and Joy Days and tell her what your most joyful thing is. Then that should be the call to action, I feel like.
Yeah.
Beautiful. Awesome. Well, thank you so much for hopping on. We really appreciate it. And thank you everybody who's listening. If you have not already, please hit subscribe on YouTube, and we will see you next time on Decision Lab. Thank you so much, everybody.